Once again, Muslim terrorists
a terrorist
slaughtered
attack.
innocent
Islamic
people.
extremists
These
now
Islamist
control much of
terrorists.
the country.
The rise
Their brand
of
of justice is brutal and deadly.
Newsflash, America. These Muslim extremists are alive and well. They are not dead, and their video is not gratuitous, and it certainly is not irrelevant. It is a warning.
Welcome to the Truth About Muslims podcast, the official podcast of the Zwemer Center for Muslim Studies, where we help to educate you beyond the media. Here are your hosts, Howard and Trevor.
This week's sponsor.
As always, CIU, Columbia International University, equips students with a biblical worldview to impact the nations with the message of Christ.
And Zwemer Center.
Zwemer Center equips the church to reach out to Muslims with understanding. And the Zwemer Center has been around since 1979.
So they know some stuff.
Yeah, they know what they're talking about. Zwemer Center is Zwemer.com. That's Z-W-E-M-E-R. I had to spell it because people were asking.
Right.
Okay, here we are with episode 10. We've got an excellent interview that I'm super excited about today with, we don't really know how to pronounce her name.
Yet.
But I'm going to go with Shirin Taber.
That's what I told you.
Howard says it's a Shirin. He has an Asian feel to it. I don't know. Maybe it's his Koreanness coming out.
All right, listen. You listeners, please, write in, be on my side. Shirin.
Shirin.
I said Shirin first.
Anyway, she is the author of Muslims Next Door. That's put out by Zondervan, and also the book Wanting All the Right Things, and that's put out by Relevant. So Muslims Next Door is the book that we're going to be talking about today, and I'm excited. We've been looking at the book this morning, and it looks like good stuff.
Yeah, it's really comprehensive. There's so much stuff that you can go through and just apply, I think, and help your inform your understanding of Muslims. And she tells her story too, which is pretty cool, and that's what we kind of want to get to today.
Absolutely, because she comes from we'll let her tell the story, but just kind of as an intro, she has a Muslim father. Her mother was Catholic. She is American Iranian, and being Iranian American, which one do you say first, actually? Iranian American or American Iranian?
Well,
I guess we'll let her say.
For me,
yeah, there you go.
Say
Howard.
Korean American.
What's up with that?
Korean American car?
American Korean? Yeah, no, you do. You say Korean American.
Korean American.
So Iranian American, I think.
Yeah, no, that'd be fine. Yeah.
So anyway, she served with Crew for 20 years.
Wow, that's a long time.
Formerly known as Campus Crusade. I still can't. I have a hard time getting on board with Crew. I keep, it's been Campus Crusade in my mind for so many years. And I'm not even a fan of the word crusade. I don't know if I ever have been, but Campus Crusade has got like an identity in my mind.
Right, and Crew sounds cool, and their new logo looks cool, but I just don't identify that with them. But that's just me.
Yeah, it's just going to take a while to rebrand, get us old guys out of there. Crew. So she served with Crew as a college student and was 20 years in direct ministry in the United States, Europe, and the Middle East.
Wow.
And has been working with Muslims the whole time. And I just think, she has a real, and that's why the title of this episode is an insider's perspective or an insider's view. She's going to give us the insider's view on Muslims Next Door because she has grown up as, I guess I would assume a multiplicity of identities, having a Muslim father, Catholic mother, Iranian, American. I'm really excited to hear her story.
Right, me too. So, without further ado...
Yeah, let's give her a call.
All right.
Hi, Trevor. How are you guys?
We're doing good, and this is Howard here.
Hi.
Hi, Howard. Good morning.
So we had a little bit of a debate before calling you on how to pronounce your name. Would you go ahead and settle that for us?
Yes. Okay. So it's Shirin.
Shirin.
We were off.
Both of us lost.
Most people say Shirin.
Oh, that's what we said.
Yes, but it's Persian, and there is no in sound in that part of the world. So it's Shirin. It's a long E sound. The second I is like a long E sound.
Yeah, it sounds much nicer when you say it. We butcher names. I don't know. Shirin sounds nicer than Shirin. So we were both wrong.
Shirin Taber. So my married name is obviously, Anglo.
Right. Yeah, we got that part right.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for joining us. We've been looking at your book this morning, and we're really excited to hear about your story.
Thank you. Yeah, I look forward to sharing.
Yeah, so why don't we just get started with what made you want to write this particular book?
Yeah, well, I was very concerned after 9/11, and I was getting calls from friends that were saying, "Are you okay? We're worried about the backlash towards Muslims, even in America." I don't know if you all were following the news back then. That was quite a while ago, but
no, we were following it very closely.
Yeah, I was actually.
Were you?
Yeah,
Okay.
I was on my way to a church.
I don't know how old you are. You could be 24 or you could be older and remember. I mean, a lot of the younger people don't really remember what happened.
Right.
But my point is that the rate of prejudice acts or outlashes towards the Muslim community was quite high, and so it took me back to my childhood experience of experiencing the hostage crisis in 1979. And I was a young girl, but I very much remembered how it felt to feel like an outsider, and not only an outsider, but, associated with the terrorist community. And I felt like, wow, this is a great opportunity to share with my American neighbors, who are these Muslims? Why have they come to America? What are they looking for? And for Christians in particular, what an amazing opportunity we have to reach out to them at a time where they're feeling very vulnerable and misunderstood. So really it was a book of building bridges, encouraging the Christian community to continue to move towards their Muslim neighbors in love.
Wow.
Addressing the fear and even hatred they might feel, and ultimately just equipping them a handbook on what does that look like when you reach out to your Muslim coworker, colleague, a student on campus.
Well,
so I don't really handle Islam or the theology other than sharing some points we have in common, which might be a bridge in sharing the gospel.
Right. Yeah, so it's interesting because you, in light of 9/11, you didn't take a back seat. You went and took it to your American neighbors and tried to help them understand and to reach out to them. That's amazing.
Yeah, I was hoping it would be a different approach. It was a really interesting experience while I was writing the book. I felt like I had many moments where the Lord was saying, use this book to inspire people and to really help Christians to identify the heart of the gospel, which is a message of love. And if you can't experience love towards those who are hardest to love, then what good is the gospel? I mean, what good is the Christian life?
And that's what we try to get across in the show. Yeah.
Yeah, Shirin, we call the show Truth About Muslims as opposed to Truth About Islam because we're much more interested in talking about Muslims than we are talking about the theology of Islam because it's the people that we're interested in. And so it's really interesting that you draw that distinction already. We like you.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I grew up in a home with a Muslim father. I mean, in fact, right now he's been in and out of the hospital, and I just it's hard, but I have to go back to what has Christ called me to do? And just serving him, even though I've asked him multiple times to really consider Christ and to pray with him, and he's, still a Muslim, and that's where he's at, and so God he continues to show me that I need to address issues in my own heart, and, and as I'm transformed, then hopefully others will be transformed around me.
You mentioned after 9/11 that it was a reminder of what it was like as a child to go through the Iranian Revolution and feel like an outsider. Could you give us a little bit more about that so that listeners can understand kind of your background?
Sure, yeah. I mean, it was a really painful time. I was a young girl. I was in junior high. And, when you're in junior high, you just want to be as normal as possible.
Right.
And just like fly under the radar. You're going through so many changes, puberty and all that stuff.
Right.
And,
Howard has a junior high daughter, so he understands the awkward years of junior high.
Yes.
Right.
It's a tough time. I mean, you're looking around at your peers, and you just so much want to be like them. And I wasn't. I really identify with the character in, I don't know if you remember that movie, The Big Fat Greek Wedding.
Oh, yeah.
I love that movie.
Excellent movie.
I don't know if you remember, there was a scene where she had flashbacks of being in high school and, you know, all the cute blonde girls, and she just kind of stuck out like a sore thumb. And, I mean, I'm definitely, you know, I'm part American, but, because of my coloring and because I had moved back from Iran in 5th grade, my teachers and classmates knew I was Iranian. You know,
Wow.
There was no way to hide that.
What state were you? What state was this that you were growing up in?
We were actually in Washington, Seattle, which is a pretty progressive area.
Yeah.
But you know, I mean, the hostage crisis was real. There were people pinning up yellow ribbons everywhere, and the news, and there were songs on the radio, bomb, 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 Iran.
Gosh.
And
So how did people react to you? Did they know you were Iranian, or were you kind of like afraid to even say? Because I've heard this one particular Iranian comedian say that during the 1979 revolution, and then after Not Without My Daughter, he wanted to change his name to Tony.
Yes, I have relatives that have changed their names to Tony.
Oh my!
Yeah, and David and Mike and all these other names. Yeah. I can just say it was when I was, as a young girl, 11, 12 years old, I was introduced to ideas of shame and guilt at a very profound level.
Wow.
And, even though I was not a part of, obviously the violence, I wasn't even there at the time, I felt associated with it. And I had teachers that stopped me in the hall and would say, Shirin, is it true that you're Iranian? I heard that you're Iranian. What do you say? You're just looking at them wide-eyed. And then there'd be kids in the hall, boys in particular, that, would kind of roughhouse and tease me and, push my brothers around in particular, who were a little younger than me, push them around near the, bathroom and make jokes about, taking hostages.
Oh, my gosh.
We got through that, but I just remember looking around and thinking, I just want to feel normal. I just want to be a normal kid. Why do I have to have this stigma associated with me? Flash forward, 6-7 years later, I, started walking with Christ through a neighbor. I can tell that story more later, but a group of Christians who were with Campus Crusade for Christ treated me completely different. They're like, wow, that's so exotic. That's so amazing that you're from, your heritage is from Iran. And
that's so cool.
They're like, wow, think of all the things you can do in life because you are multicultural. And they challenged me actually to embrace my heritage and then, of course, use it for the kingdom.
Well, Shirin, it sounds like that would be something that a lot of listeners would like to know. So what was it that actually drew you to Christ through these folks? Like a little bit about your testimony, because it seems like so many Muslims right now are in that same boat that you're in. They just want to feel normal. Everything they see in the media is demonizing them. And so what was it about these people that drew you to Jesus? Yeah,
well, my mother was Catholic, so I had some knowledge of the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
But the inciting incident, for example, would be my mother passed away a year later in 1980, and we had a neighbor across the street who came in and just completely took over, and the enormity of her love and her service to my family was, I'd never seen that before. She just, provided meals and carpooled us and, fed us and got us Christmas gifts, and just her love. And then, of course, then she began to share Christ with us and, sharing that I couldn't, how could I go through with my mother's death and approach my future alone? And so she encouraged me to receive Christ. And, it was so compelling because her lifestyle backed up her words.
So it seems like Pamela was pretty influential in you coming to know Jesus.
Yes, she was. She was a neighbor that lived across the street. Even though she had 3 children of her own, she made time for our family, and she just provided for us in ways that were extraordinary, and providing meals. She had the church praying for us. She made time out of her schedule to help us with getting us to sporting activities and including us in her family and taking us to church. All these things, combined, just gave a magnitude to her sharing Christ with us.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like that's very normal within, an American context. Like if you were in Iran and you knew a neighbor that maybe had lost a mother, that you would see a lot of people kind of reaching out. But in the United States, we don't often see that. So that's pretty amazing for this lady to take that role.
Yeah. No, she did. She was an exceptional human being. But you know what? It served as an example, as a template for me. And, I've followed her lead over the years, and we've had a lot of students and people in her home and sharing Christ with them. And that's just the power of, a role model, a disciple, someone who really takes it seriously. God's call for us to love our neighbors as ourselves. And I saw it firsthand. I continue to see it.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you get the chance to travel at all through the Middle East? And what were some of your experiences? Or maybe even Iran?
Oh yeah, definitely. So after I graduated from the University of Washington, I felt a call on my life to serve internationally. And so I joined the Ministry of Campus Crusade for Christ, and I was very involved in campus ministry with college students. And I lived and worked in the Middle East and in Europe and the U.S. And I traveled extensively throughout North Africa and the Middle East, including Iran. Some trips were, more just to visit, and others were trips where we actually working and serving the minority churches in that region.
Right. In your book,
So,
you mentioned when you tried to go back to Iran after you had been married.
Oh, yeah, that was a really interesting story.
Yeah, tell us about that. What happened there?
Forgot about that.
Well, I came to find out, initially I thought it would be no big deal to travel back to Iran to visit my dad. He really wanted me to come back and visit him. And I was about 30 years old and, relatively newly married, and I had 2 little kids, and I thought it would be a piece of cake, and I found out I needed a passport to go to Iran.
Right.
And I don't want to say anything.
Iranian passport.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. And it's come to find out that because of my heritage, they viewed me as Iranian and like my father, and so therefore I had to have a passport, Iranian passport, to travel there. It was really difficult. This part, I don't know if I can share too much about this in the interview, but it's really tough being a follower of Christ and traveling into that part of the world. And so they challenged me on several levels about, my marriage certificate, that it was a Christian wedding, and they challenged me on a lot of issues. It was really tough to get the paperwork to be able to travel. So I was able to go, but it was very difficult getting in and out, and I probably won't be doing that again in the near future.
Yeah.
So for the government was asking you questions about your faith and your religion.
Yes.
Wow,
yes.
that's interesting.
They didn't understand why I was not Muslim like my father.
Yeah,
Wow.
It seems like there would be no context for an Iranian that wasn't Muslim, and it must have threw them into a little bit of confusion.
Yeah, they did not. Well, they didn't recognize my Christian wedding certificate. They said that I was not legally married according to their laws. And I would have to have a Muslim wedding to be considered legally married.
Oh, man.
And that my children were not my children; they were my husband's children.
Wow.
So it was really tough. But I went back 7 times and was able to finally get the documentation. But it's really tough to travel to that part of the world. I don't recommend it unless you really have everything in order and you're ready to deal with those challenges.
Shirin, what has it been like for your relationship with your father, being Christian, and you mentioned your father being Muslim? Would you be okay with sharing a little bit about what that's been like for you and him?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I grew up in a home where, my parents, they chose to marry each other. My mother was Catholic. My father was Iranian and Muslim. We lived a blended life of cultures and languages and traditions. So we've navigated it, as a family all these years. Definitely there are some points that we don't talk about, just because they create misunderstandings, and some of the projects I've done over the years, I don't share those with my family, my Iranian relatives.
Right.
Some are for security reasons, some are just, they're outside the box for them. But in general, it's been an amazing opportunity because it's part of my heritage. That's what compels me to continue to share and continue to work in that part of the world and resource that part of the world. I live with attention every day, every day. And I think it's compelling. And, I have friends that their parents have come to faith in Christ, and they just pretty much go on with their lives, and they embrace, the American dream. And yet I feel like, I'm regularly reminded that I can't just forget about that part of the world and the Muslim people, that it's still, a part of my life. And my kids' lives. My kids have grown up with, Muslim relatives. My stepmother, my dad remarried a very devout Muslim woman. So when she stays with us, she prays 5 times a day in her home. And
they see
so
that.
My kids are confronted with that. Yeah. And it's good. It just keeps everything very real. We watch the news as a family, and my kids are drawn to those stories of ISIS, and my son is in college and wants to go and actually serve in that region.
Wow.
Why? Because it's part of his heritage, and he feels like he's part of that great story.
Right.
He wants to participate.
And you mentioned heritage. Is it difficult for you to separate the Islam or Muslim from the heritage of Iran?
No, they're so no, not at all, because the Iranians are a culture unto themselves. They're different than the Arabs, or they're different than the Turks.
Right.
And there are things that are Iranian in nature that are different than Islam. And most Iranians would tell you that they were not Muslim to begin with. They were conquered by the Arabs, and then more recently, in light of the regime change, where they were under a monarchy and now they're under a religious dictatorship.
Right.
They're very aware of how their lifestyles have changed. But if you get inside their homes or their parties, they're fully Persian. They're fully Iranian. So there is a distinction. But, they're still Muslim. They're not going to say they're anything else.
Right. Right. I think that's one of the misconceptions that people often have, is that there is no distinction between cultural identity and religious identity, and they just kind of see these as, intricately weaved together and inseparable. But it sounds like you're saying that, you can be fully Persian and also a follower of Christ, and there's no problem with that for you. That's very encouraging.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So looking at 9/11, you said that kind of promoted a lot of the misconceptions that were going around. What were some of the misconceptions that followed 9/11 that prompted you in writing? Yeah,
I think, I was just struck with how, and I'm sure this has happened all throughout history, but how quickly, an event or something that happened in one location in the world would affect hundreds and thousands and millions of people that were not associated with that at all.
Right.
And and if you really do know your Muslim neighbor or colleague or coworker, for the most part, 90% of the time, they're fairly moderate, they're fairly secular. And the very reason why they come to this country is because they're looking for the same things that we're looking for. They're looking for, freedom of speech, freedom of thought. They want to, if they have daughters, they want to raise their daughters in a society that promotes equality and will give their kids every opportunity that they can. And so, but so quickly you forget those things and just kind of canvass the whole Muslim world as if, they are exactly like what we're seeing right now in the news, ISIS and so forth. Now, I don't want to diminish the fact that there are elements in Islam that very quickly can blow up and turn into like what we're seeing in Islam.
No pun intended.
Yes, exactly. There are things that we can't identify with, where you can have very quickly in the Middle East a mob mentality. You can have, but I don't think that needs to be a fear for us here in America.
Right, and you do mention a little bit in the book about sort of the historical background between some of that mob mentality that's kind of been perpetuated, right? Yes.
And one thing I've tried to share with my colleagues, even some who are in Christian full-time ministry, and they'll get frustrated with believers in Christ who come from a Muslim heritage. Let's say a Christian, Iranian Christian or Arab Christian, but they've only been a Christian for 10 years or 20 years. And they'll make comments, where they will disparage them. And I have to remind them, we are a first generation of believers. I'm a first generation in a line of that goes back, 1,600 years to Muhammad. And so my life as a Christian is going to look different than someone who comes from a heritage where their grandparents and their great-grandparents and their great-great-grandparents were, Christian and going to church and had established these disciplines and, things that we take for granted. Those are things that are passed on from generation to generation, how you live your life, your morals, your values, your integrity, your, believing that lying, for example, is not a good thing, or whatever it is.
Right.
And so my point is that, we as a nation have embraced freedom of speech or First Amendment or going back in time, the Enlightenment and the Protestant Reformation, all these things that have shaped our psyche and our value system. But when you're coming from the Middle East, these are fairly new ideals, and for some people, they don't even accept them. So we just need a lot of patience in relating to our Muslim neighbors, and then those who even come to Christ. We need to realize that these things will be played out in 2 and 3 generations.
That is an amazing point. I've never thought about that. I've always known about cultural differences between Muslim background believers, but I just never thought. I never thought in those terms, and just how much their worldview might be completely different than someone that has a heritage of Christian faith. That's amazing.
Yes, very much so. And so I always say, hey, it's going to take 2 or 3 generations.
Right.
Please be gracious with my brother or sister.
Right.
Absolutely.
When you get frustrated with their worldview. And I see those changes in my household. I married, a guy who's white and Lutheran and blue eyes. And then I see that, his way of living and thinking has affected my children, and even though my children have a Persian or Iranian heritage and their grandfather's Muslim, I see the things that my husband has added to their lives. But I still hang on to some of our Iranian culture too, because there are things that are beautiful in the Middle East that I want my kids to hang on to.
Right.
Yeah.
The concept of
I was kind of wondering, Shirin, if there's maybe some things in the Iranian worldview that would maybe challenge some of our Western views of theology and the ways that we relate to God, and maybe we could learn a great deal from Muslims that come to know Jesus and think about God differently than maybe we do. Could you share maybe some of those things that you've seen in the church in the West?
Definitely. I mean, I can share more later, but the way I raise my kids, honestly, I mean, there is this aspect of biblical Christianity and our values, but then there are things in Iranian culture, things like hospitality and modesty and, showing respect to our elders.
Right.
Serving people when they come in our home, that our guests are first. All these things, these are things that I learned through my Iranian heritage. I did not learn this, just living in American culture. Now, I'm not saying it's not there. It is. I'm sure it is there.
You do have to look hard for it.
Yeah, I mean, if you just watch TV all day and you're on the internet, you're not going to learn it. It really has to be something that's passed down from your grandparents, or you just, you're part of an amazing community. But yeah, my girls in particular, I find it's very, much more difficult to raise daughters here than it would be in a, I'm not saying a Muslim context, but an Iranian context.
Right.
Where time they're very little, it's just a given that you're hospitable and you're modest and you're polite and you're goal-oriented, but you still, you work towards showing respect to your parents and, and not that every Iranian or Middle Eastern home is perfect, but those are definitely ideals that are sewn into the culture. Again.
Right. We see that as a common theme. You're right. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and I see that too. Like with my girls.
Howard's Korean, by the way.
Yeah, I'm Korean. My wife is American. And so we.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Great.
And so we have kind of that interesting thing too, that we kind of see them picking up certain things, but it's difficult when the rest of their peers are not learning these things, or it's not being reinforced by the culture around. And so something that you're trying to instill in your daughters, it's being countered by the world, by the culture we live in. So I totally understand it. It's difficult. Yeah. So okay.
Yeah. I think we share a lot in common as Asian and Middle Eastern, the way we raise our kids.
So, in your book, Shirin, you mentioned that one of the key components is being able to live your Christian faith authentically with your Muslim friends. Could you give us like a few examples of what you mean? What does it mean to live an authentic Christian faith with Muslims?
Yes, that's a great question. Yeah, first of all, I'd like to share that the idea of living authentically is to not be ashamed of the fact that you're a Christian. That oftentimes Muslims, when they come to the U.S., or even if they were to meet you in their homeland, if you're an American, or even if you have an Asian or African heritage, they're going to assume that you are a Christian. They may not understand what it means to fully be committed and surrendered to Christ, but they're just going to assume you are. So you don't need to make any apologies for who you are in your faith.
Right.
In fact, they're going to be...
That's a little bit different.
Curious. Yeah, they're going to be curious to see, okay, what does this look like in, the modern world? What does this look like day to day in a workplace or in the context of a friendship or, on campus or in your marriage? And so, there's no reason to make excuses or, if anything, live it out boldly and dynamically. And then the other point I would make is, just roll through life with your Muslim friends. We don't have to always be doing spiritual activities with people to somehow point them to Christ. Yes, of course, it would be awesome if you can invite them to church or a small group and offer to pray with them and to give them a scripture or to point them to some media, perhaps Christian broadcasting or Christian films. But ultimately, they have to see you just living your life. It's having dinner parties and, going, if you're a parent, standing next to each other on the soccer field and cheering on your kids. And if they're struggling in a relationship or their marriage, really taking an interest and offering to walk with them through that. Realizing that Muslims, they oftentimes feel very deeply, whether they're grieving the death of someone or a broken relationship, that you just enter into life with them and just, be Christ to them as much as you can.
It's really interesting. It's really interesting that you say that, Shirin, because in our context, we think of the gospel as being something that we hope to eventually get to in relationships, and we kind of have this friendship evangelism, and then, maybe a year from now we tell someone we're Christian. But with a Muslim, you're saying, go ahead, dive right in, live boldly for Christ in front of them, that they actually are anticipating and expect that from you.
Yes, definitely. And you never know how God is going to work. I've been in friendships with Muslims where I'll think, oh, wow, this could be like a 3-year, marathon. And then within 3 months or even 3 weeks, I will see significant shifts and very deep conversations and people even praying to receive Christ.
Wow.
Receiving Christ, they don't even know that they're actually crossing a line spiritually. They may not even call themselves a Christian initially, but they want Christ. They want to experience this dynamic relationship with God. And so you just don't know how things are going to play out. And so my advice is love them passionately and enter in and just roll through life. You don't need to make a lot of changes in your schedule. Just, invite them to participate as much as possible.
I love how non-programmatic you're making it sound. It sounds so organic, where this is just going to be a natural fruit of you entering into life with them, and then them seeing that authenticity in your life, and how much you do love Christ, and how that just kind of shows through in everything you do. And it kind of takes the pressure off for our listeners to have to be like scholars,
have a dynamic presentation,
apologetics,
Yeah.
all these kind of things. But you're just saying, hey, live life, feel what you feel with them, show them Christ in your own life, and things to happen. It's
redeeming the ordinary.
Right.
It really does, yeah, because they, like I said, they are curious and they want to see and learn. And I've lived in Europe and the Middle East and the U.S. And like I found that living in Paris, France, it was much tougher to talk to the French about the gospel.
Wow.
Whereas the Muslim, because they are growing up with a worldview where they already have a respect and reverence for God, most of them do. Some are very secular and they're still searching themselves, but for the most part they do. And so if you find those commonalities and then you can show them what it looks like just in everyday life, whether you're dating or married or you have new children or you're, looking for a new job, and just what that looks like, they find it very attractive. And I guess my last point would be is really challenge yourself to see them with eyes of love. I feel like too often we look, and I'm not sure about your audiences, but at least my generation, growing up in the 80s and 90s, oftentimes evangelism was seen almost like a project. You had to convince someone. We appealed to reason and logic. And I'm finding more and more that it's really, again, about a relationship. Just as we have a relationship with God, we need to have a relationship with one another. And as I pursue love in my relationship with Muslims, I find that's where I'm transformed and then they are transformed. And so, yes, we need to understand theology and scriptures and, their worldview, but ultimately it's the relationship that will point them to Christ.
Yeah, this is becoming a theme, I think, with a few of the people that we've interviewed. I'm thinking last week we had Matthew Stone on, and he was mentioning that, apologetics can be really good, especially for the Christian to understand their own faith. But ultimately, you're not going to find where Jesus kind of sits a person down and says, you need to understand these 3 propositional truth statements about me. It's more of a follow me relational model of evangelism, and his mindset was we're to present ourselves and present Christ through us to people, and to do it in that relational context. So it's interesting that you're kind of hitting on that same theme.
Yeah, very much so. And Muslims are trained from early childhood to basically debate any other worldview or Christianity.
Right.
So we don't want to start there. We want to just start with sharing our lives, and as those questions naturally surface, then of course we need to address them.
And you mentioned that the Muslims that you've met and known feel things very, very deeply, right? And so I think some of the things that we're talking about here is maybe engaging the heart over the mind at a certain level. Right, because their minds have maybe been engaged with what they've been taught as children, but then when you engage the heart, it's like a whole different element with them seeing how we love Christ and we live for Christ and we follow Christ, and it's not an obligation; it's really relational. And so maybe it seems like it's engaging a totally different aspect of the person. So that's really
I agree,
cool.
and I've been told that Westerners from an Iranian Muslim, he'll tell you Westerners approach life often with their head, and that a Muslim will approach life first from their heart and passion and conviction, and then of course they use reason and logic,
right?
But they start with their kind of their gut, I guess, or their heart,
right?
And
so that's even
where they make their connection. Mm-hmm.
That's even that common ground that we have if we're these passionate Christians that really love the Lord, have a relationship with the Lord. It maybe hits common ground with these Muslims that are very passionate, So
I think often they're looking for people of faith, and they can share some commonality with someone that has a deep adoration for God and Christ. And Shirin, would you say that that's a starting point? Is just maybe talking about your own love for God and seeing where a Muslim's at and seeing where they're at with their own relationship with God? Yeah,
definitely. I mean, as you share life and you hear about their pain, which is, all mankind experiences challenges and pain, but just very gently volunteering how you work through your challenges and pain, and whether it's going to God prayer or spending quiet time and praying and writing and reading and journaling and seeking advice from trusted people. Just sharing your journey and then just kind of guiding that conversation gently and then ultimately to Christ.
So how has prayer been received by your Muslim friends when you offer to pray with them? I'm assuming pray with them for the things that they're struggling with.
Well, I found, again, if you have a relationship, and it can happen very quickly in a matter of even just days, but if you've established a relationship and you have the privilege of, entertaining them and revealing your life and sharing and hearing from them, then as you listen and the Spirit moves you, then you can just offer to pray for different things. And I just say, hey, before we leave today, can I pray for you? And we'll find a quiet place and pray for them. So it's not that different than how you would live your life with your Christian friends.
So you're saying they don't mind?
No, it's an act of love. It's such an intimate, vulnerable place to go with a friend. Not at all. Wow. I've only found it to be very positive. Now you have to earn that trust, and like I said, it can take a little bit of time, but if you find yourself in a situation, let's say someone's a student on a campus and they're living on a dorm floor with someone, or they have a neighbor across the street and they begin sharing about their lives, and then that person, Mohammed or Layla or whoever, begins to reveal something difficult, then yes, you can stop right then and say, before we end our time or before I leave, can I just pray with you for a few minutes for this concern? I
think that's a great point. Like, I don't know, that's kind of a mark, even in our Western relationships, would be if someone starts sharing their heart with you, like I think a Christian would automatically think, well, let's go to prayer. So if a Muslim comes and you have that relationship and they're sharing something, that's deep or painful, that's a mark of trust. And yeah, I mean, I think that'd be a great, kind of a sign that, let's bring the Lord into this and talk and have prayer. So that's cool.
Yeah, I think it's hard for us sometimes to understand because we think of secular Americans that we wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable going there in prayer because we don't want to offend, but it sounds like you're saying that Muslims, that's the correct place to go.
I think it's very possible. And, more and more, a lot of the younger Muslims are very secular. So we have to, again, assess the situation.
Right.
And you do that through body language. You look at their eyes, you look at their posture, are they leaning in or are they leaning away from you? You listen to their tone of their voice. And as you assess these things and you feel like, we're at a comfortable place, then you can definitely share your life and offer to pray or go deeper in your conversation. It's not something really difficult to do. It's just really, looking at that person and saying, how can I serve them? How can I, be where they are, rather than trying to have an agenda and take them to a place that we want them to go.
Right. It's out of
really
a real deep concern.
And serving them.
Right. It's like you really do want them to meet Christ, not just because you want a notch on your belt, but you love them and your heart's breaking for them. And I see what you're saying. That's great.
Yeah, I think I read something recently from Carl Mandera saying something along those lines about reaching out in love and loving another person, not just so that you can get a notch on your belt. Whether or not they respond or not doesn't change the fact that we are to reach out in love. And genuinely loving somebody means sitting down with them and joining them in their pain and their life and their struggles and praying with them and just hoping that the Holy Spirit works in their lives. And I think it takes a lot of pressure off of us. So I find it really encouraging, Shirin, what you're sharing.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm blessed to talk with you. And it's a privilege. It's a privilege. And I find that actually reaching out to Muslims helps me to be more confident reaching out to other people. It's like when you can overcome those fears and those barriers, you realize that people are people and they all need to be loved. We need to handle everyone carefully. And the goal is really to honor the Lord and just be the best example we can be in loving others.
Right. And that's kind of what our show is about. Like, we really want to help Christians in America that are hearing our podcast to really maybe they're on the fence. Maybe they're like, yeah, I know I should, but they don't have the heart for Muslims, and they don't see them as real people. Maybe they're just buying into everything the media is saying, and we're trying to get them off the fence and saying, no. Christ is bigger than that. Christ is bigger than our nationality. Christ is bigger than our political stances. Our prejudices, and that we have a responsibility as Christians to go beyond that. And we try to portray that on the show, and sometimes it's easy. Sometimes, we're just hoping for the best. And yeah. Last thing, could you tell us a little bit about the Visual Story Network and what you and your husband are doing with that?
Yes. So we were actually serving with the Jesus Film Project for 7 years in Southern California, and my husband was asked to take this new initiative, which was helping multiple ministries and churches learn how to use media more effectively for the gospel, for them. And so he created this network where literally hundreds of ministries and leaders collaborate on projects to use media more effectively. So whether it's through the big screen or through even your mobile phone, how do you create content for your phone?
Right.
And they use it for storytelling, films, documentaries, messaging, branding, whatever. And so we assist agencies in developing media and getting them the training, or we have a network of producers and directors to create content.
That's so amazing that you're able to use technology to further the gospel and teaching other people how to do that.
We love it. We just did a story workshop in LA 2 weeks ago with 48 different mission agencies and churches, and we taught them story structure, content, and how to use story properly to share your message.
That's so cool.
Yeah, I'm excited about the idea of collaboration. It's so hard these days to get people to collaborate on things, and it's just neat that you have so many different mission agencies working together on this.
Yes, exactly. And raising the bar, really trying to improve our craft.
We really appreciate you joining us today and taking time out of your busy schedule. So thanks so much, and we look forward to doing this again and getting to hear more about what the Lord is doing in your life and how He's working through you to share the love of Christ with Muslims. So hopefully in the future we can call on you and get you back on the show, and we'll be sure to offer listener feedback to you as we get it.
Very good. Thank you. God bless you both. Have a great day.
All right, so that was the interview with Shirin Taber.
Now that we've settled the bet on how to pronounce Shirin's name, it's neither Shirin or Shirin.
And it's funny that she actually mentioned Shirin because I was like, oh, I'm really wrong.
Well, I spoke to her once on the phone earlier, and I think I did call her Shirin. I bet she's just been called that for so long she probably just doesn't correct people anymore and tells them the right name. But Shirin does sound much nicer, I think.
I thought Shirin's my last name's Key, but everyone calls me Kai because it's spelled K-I.
Yeah.
Kai, so I don't even say anything. But if they call me Harold, I'll kind of call them out.
I get called Kevin all the time. Honestly, I have no idea why. I think it's because Trevor, and there's the V sound in the middle of the name, and it's just they remember Kevin or Travis.
Anytime I think of Kevin, I think of the guy in the office.
Anyway, man, I really appreciate Shirin's perspective, though. I think she brought a perspective that we haven't heard from any of our other interviewees.
I was just thinking, like, it just felt different than some of these other guys that we've interviewed. Not that they're any better, it's just kind of a different feel. I felt like it was, extremely relational, very much more like where other people just listening to this podcast, you listeners, listening to this podcast could just hear and access kind of her heart and what she was saying and how to live your faith out in real tangible, simple ways. And make a huge impact. I thought it was really cool.
Yeah, the idea of being authentic and just, I don't know, I was looking for like a magic recipe or something, but when she started to break it down, it was basically saying, just live your life with people.
Right.
And that's actually more challenging than it sounds because everybody's so busy. But I think that's what she's saying is we have to actually take Muslims to the DMV, help them get their license, go with them to the school and meet with the guidance counselor and do just the practical daily things that they need help with.
Right, and I think that has to be a conscious decision on each of us because I know for myself, I have 5 kids. I'm a ministry, and then I do this part time. I'm busy, crazy, want to hang out with my friends, have downtime. I'm not thinking about my neighbor and living life with them so much. And it just has to be kind of like this conscious decision. And, you know, just to say, Trevor, I think you and your family do an amazing job at this with the Muslims next door.
Yeah, I actually do have Muslims in my neighborhood, and we see
they
them,
come over all the time.
It's true.
You know,
we love them.
And they've even did they invite you to kill a goat or something?
Yeah, I've been part of more animal sacrifices than here than I was.
Not sacrifices, but yeah.
No, I know it wasn't a goat; it was a cow. I was. This is no joke. It was about 5:30 in the morning, and I got a phone call, and it was my neighbor saying, "Hey, what are you doing today?" And I said, "I'm going to work." And he said, "Any chance you can get the day off?" And I thought, "Why?" And I'm thinking something's wrong. You know, it's so early in the morning. And he said, "Well, we bought a cow, and we want you to come with us."
We bought a cow.
Oh, and I was like, "Wait a second, we're gonna kill a cow?" And they were like, "Yeah." And I thought, well, I think I could get off work for that.
That's kind of cool.
And so we went and well, actually, when they were talking about how we were going to kill it, I said, "Well, what do you need me to do?" And they said, "We need help getting it down, because you know, in Islam, you have to bring the cow down to the ground before you can, you know, you have to actually slice the throat. There's no shooting it. You have to cut the throat and bleed it out for the Eid sacrifice, which we'll talk about Eid sacrifice on another show. Many of you guys are wondering, what is the Eid sacrifice? Well, it actually has to do with Abraham. So anyway, we'll talk about that another time. But this was an Eid sacrifice that was special because I had never sacrificed an animal that big. And so,
yeah, that's a big animal.
Yeah. So you can imagine, I show up, there's 3 of us, and they're like, "Here, you hold the chain." So I have this cow held by a chain, and I have it on video. We should put that in the show notes.
Ooh, I haven't even seen this video.
Yeah, it's group. You know, I'll preface it by saying it's not for everybody. You know,
right? Because you are killing a cow.
Yes.
And just to kind of give you listeners just kind of some warning, Trevor and I are both hunters, but we hunt to feed our family, not just we don't like to kill things.
No, I love animals.
Yeah, it's not like that. So for some of you guys are outraged, don't think that way. Trevor's not excited about going to kill a cow just to kill a cow, but it's an interesting experience, and to do this with his neighbors, with Muslim neighbors is.
And I had never killed a cow, so I was kind of interested in just what would that process look like, and are we going to wrestle this thing down, hold it down, and so I'm
tipping to the next level. Yeah,
I was ready. But anyway, we got out there, and a couple other guys showed up, and the cow was incredibly cooperative. You know, he didn't know what was coming.
I was like, what does that mean? He just like laid down for you?
No, I mean, there's still a technique. You know, if you've ever like wrestled a dog and you try to get him down, you take the one leg and pull it, and then it falls. I don't know. Somebody's maybe deeply offended right now at the idea of taking down a cow.
That's exactly what I'm thinking right now.
Yeah.
Someone's offended. But
anyway,
don't be offended.
This was all part of, you know, at some point there was a conversation about Abraham and the sacrifice and what was God ransoming Abraham's child from by providing a sacrificial substitutionary lamb, essentially. That's what they're remembering, which is directly related to the gospel. So those of you that are deeply offended, just know that Jesus was talked about after the sacrifice of the cow. I hope that helps.
Yeah, that helps me.
Nonetheless, if you want to see the video, we'll put it in the show notes. It was an interesting experience, especially for the rural farmer who probably had never met a Muslim up until this point in his life. And suddenly there are a dozen dudes all dressed in full-on, you know, celebratory garb, and we all show up ready to wrestle a cow down and cut its throat. And he watched the whole thing. I mean, he was fascinated. So anyway, it was a cultural experience for him, I'm sure.
Okay, and here's another thing. Every time Trevor talks, I'm always thinking about something. Ooh, this needs to be said. This needs to be said. Because Trevor just goes at it. Okay, so this means if you have a friend, neighbor next door that is a Muslim, it doesn't mean that you're going to have to slaughter a cow with him. Okay,
but it does mean you might have the opportunity to slaughter.
See, there you go again. Okay. Listen, it doesn't mean that. It just means that you're going to live life together. You're going to help them and encouragement. They're going to be an encouragement to you, right? Aren't your Muslim neighbors an encouragement to you?
Absolutely. Shireen was talking about this in the interview, that there's a certain aspect of the culture that she's teaching her own children. My own children, I believe, are going to be fuller, more rich culturally humans because of their experience with these Pakistani neighbors that I have. I mean, they have known them since they were, my youngest daughter was only a year old. And so
Wow.
they've known them for the last 4 or 5 years. And we engage with them all the time and have great conversations about the world, about religion, about all kinds of things, about Jesus. And my daughter regularly will pray for them. We pray for them as a family. We break bread with them. And our greatest hope is that they might one day know Jesus as Savior.
And something I noticed about Mr. Khan is that he knows that Trevor is very, very different. He doesn't just kind of compartmentalize him as someone that's like the general populace, kind of like what Shirin was saying about Pamela. She knew that Pamela was different, and it's really neat to hear Mr. Khan's perspective on Trevor. He's just like, man, anything that if you're a friend of Trevor, I do anything for Trevor. That means I'll do anything for you. And I'm just like, man, what kind of impact has Trevor had on this guy's life just by living life together with this guy and his family? So it's pretty neat.
Yeah, I think Shirin really was bringing that home, that idea of being authentic, living life with Muslims, and it was a good challenge. I don't know. We don't like to generalize, particularly on this show, but I'm almost wondering is maybe part of this the fact that Shirin is a woman and women are typically more relational. I was just really challenged by her views to be, man, we have to be more relational with Muslims, and so many times I find people wanting to win an argument or make a point, and Shirin, and my wife is this way, she's much more along the lines of just get to know people. Right. And so, I don't know, maybe I'm off base there, but I was just really encouraged by that.
I think you're right. I mean, I don't think people are a checklist or a to-do list, right? I think people, it's not like, okay, I need to go through evangelism with them and get them to pray the sinner's prayer. It's not even really like that at the beginning. Like, I think as a relational approach, it's more like, I'm really going to love them, have compassion for them. I'm going to pray for them. And as opportunities arise, I'm going to take those opportunities, but knowing that God is going to do this, in this person, and not just take them through this program, turn them out like a factory. Because I think sometimes we have that kind of mentality. Still, I think we're farther away from that than we used to be as a church in America, but I think that sometimes kind of comes up.
I'm still stuck on just girls are more relational than guys.
Right.
You go to a party with your wife and like 5 minutes there, they're talking about life issues, and guys are still talking about football, and that's the depth of the conversation. Right.
The guys are like, let's go home, honey.
So anyway, I was encouraged. I really appreciated her views on culture, on looking at the Iranian Revolution, and just being able to connect with how a lot of Muslims probably feel today when they feel very stereotyped, they feel very alone, isolated. Just the world is looking at them through a lens that probably doesn't feel very good, and so we have to bring a different answer, like Pamela did for her.
Right. Please check out Shirin's book, The Muslims Next Door. Yeah. And like you said, Amazon's a great, easy place to pick it up, and it's on Kindle.
too. Yeah, so we'll add it in the show notes as well and put a link there. I got the book this morning. I got the e-version and was just flipping through it, and it had some very good stuff and very helpful. Very easy, enjoyable to read, and so... Anyway, so that's it for this week. Thank you so much for joining us. Join us next week. We have another special guest. We're actually next week going to be talking about the text, the Quran, and we're going to have a what I would consider to be one of the foremost experts on the Quran, Dr. Peter Riddell, and he's going to join us and discuss the text and kind of look at it from a perspective of how can two people read the same text and come up with radically different views. So those of you that are more the textual folks, be sure to tune in next week. So thanks so much for listening. Check out the website, truthaboutmuslims.com, and be sure to spread the word. We'll see you next week.